Now, demand side buyers, we've got quick fire inputs coming from two speakers on our demand side, talking directly about their experiences in procurement with a focus on buying recycled or low carbon aluminium, including the challenges. So this is a chance for a couple of buyers to ask questions of our speakers, and then we'll open to a broader audience. I noticed very lively conversations going on in the chat, so I encourage that to continue. But for now, Megan Sargeant, Sustainability Manager for Delivery at Lendlease, New South Wales and ACT. Can I hand over to you, Megan?
Hi, Hudson. Yeah, sure.
Terrific, thank you.
I'll just very quickly introduce myself, my experience and how I found myself as on the demand side. I work for Lendlease. I specialise in sustainability through delivery, which includes a view of procurement. We recently undertook a case study to try and procure a lower carbon facade. And we had actually what sounds like a fairly similar experience to Jeff. We were able to identify a number of products in the international market that were pretty interesting to us because they looked like they were going to provide a meaningful reduction in the embodied carbon of our facade systems. But we were a bit hamstrung in the end by some of our own internal supply chains and our own understanding of how we procure aluminium for our facades. We have had success in our international geographies where we operate abroad. We've had a lot more success finding that we can procure some of these lower embodied carbon international products, but it's something that has really kick-started our own commitment to how we procure low embodied aluminium for our future projects. I'm happy to jump straight into some questions if now's the time.
Okay, terrific. So that's on the ground working on Australian projects, seeing what's available overseas and maybe not being able to get it here.
Yeah.
Let's go to Adrian Piani, Executive Group Manager, Infrastructure Delivery Partners, and a member of the Australian Procurement and Construction Council. Sorry, I skipped over ACT government there, Adrian. Are you... Thank you for zooming in. Can I hand over to you for a buyer's perspective?
Yeah, I think I'm representing or giving a government side view of procurement from my role with the Australian Procurement and Construction Council, which ACT government's a member of, and all state jurisdictions are, as well as New Zealand. So it is a good forum to get a picture of how government procures and delivers infrastructure. So I hope I can share some general insights. Really, and I'm also the ACT Chief Engineer, which gives me a bit more of a broader view of the future of infrastructure and where we should be heading. In terms of a government procurement process, it's reflecting on where we start from and where we end up, and therefore what's important in this conversation. So it starts with, in a government sense, always a policy setting, which I'd say most or all governments across Australia have a commitment to sustainability. Varying degrees have a commitment to a zero carbon outcome, but commonly I don't think that includes scope 3 emissions, and I know the ACT is currently looking at that. I expect it to become of more interest. But once you've got the policies set up, setting, I guess then you're going through, in terms of delivery of infrastructure, you're normally going through a business case process. So then also then, as well as having a policy setting, you'd hope that the business case process gives some clarity on requirements in terms of direction with sustainability and indeed carbon. Once you get through your business case process, then you're in the procurement process. And from my mind, in terms of procurement, there's probably two elements that would bring you to a low or encourage a low carbon outcome. Fundamentally, there's the scope of the project, the underpinning technical specifications and guidelines that we use, which might provide some minimum standards or some aspirations, but also just the general scope of the project might point to a requirement to have low carbon materials used. So I think you've both got the project itself, its scope, and then the underpinning technical guidelines which are used in the design process. And then the last stage is then the actual procurement process. And I guess through a procurement, you can either specify a target, you could say, this is the outcome we want, and very specifically talk to carbon or any other outcome and give a target. I suspect that's complicated, but still you can do it. Or the other mechanism you can do, excuse me, is provide for your weighted assessment criteria to give focus to environmental sustainability and indeed low carbon. And so you're asking the market to come back with their best and brightest ideas in the hope that, they will hope that they will get a higher score in the sustainability sector, which overall gives them the win on the job. So it's probably 3 or 4 elements of how you drive from a policy setting down to an individual procurement. And I would say, just in some conversations I've had internally to see what would drive us to low carbon outcomes. In fact, at the moment, it would seem that the environmental rating tools that can be commonly used, particularly on bigger projects, are the other mechanism to drive for low carbon outcomes, because you can get points through that process by achieving lower carbon. So I think possibly in our procurement and construction phase, the use of rating tools is potentially the biggest driver at the moment for getting low carbon outcomes. Thank you.
Fantastic. Adrian, thank you. I think your procurement, but also your engineering hats add to the conversation, because we are hearing through our research and also other parts of the sector that the need for an engineer to have absolute certainty that what they're signing off on is fit for purpose, and an old standard might still be the current standard, even if it's not addressing the carbon challenge, can be a barrier. So I think your multiple hats add a lot to that conversation. Thank you.